Welcome to another edition of Conversations with the Experts. I'm delighted to have a follow-up conversation with Derek Aranda about supply chain. After we recorded our first conversation, there were a few tariff adjustments started by the United States and probably have a bit of an influence on supply chain. Derek, as you recall, was most recently General Manager of Global Supply Chain Strategy at Shell, and he is a expert in the 11 Canterbury network. So, Derek, as we talked about, tariffs are on, off, bigger, smaller. I imagine it's created a lot of uncertainty. And what are the kind of immediate steps and the general impact that these have had on the supply chain?
Well, Dan, first of all, thank you for having me back. I enjoyed the first conversation and looking forward to continuing that dialogue here with you today. I think you're right. The tariffs have really introduced a significant amount of uncertainty into organizations and supply chain in particular. You asked what are some of the things that we can do. I think one of the first things I want to just preface this with is tariffs are a disruption. Absolutely. And we're going to have to respond and adjust to the tariffs as they come on. But as supply chains, we've long had to deal with disruptions, right? So I think the first thing we need to do is really step back and assess, do this particular disruption, these tariffs mean for us and our organization. So I think I want to remind us of the old adage, right? Keep calm and carry on, I think is probably the first most important thing that we need to do in this situation. But make no mistake, I think the tariffs that we have seen over the past several months really are a material impact on a lot of organizations in a lot of ways, not just here in the US, but really around the world, because it's a bit of these tariffs are hitting just about everything, everywhere, all at the same time. If I use another phrase there, and I think really that first step is to step back and think and assess and understand what do these tariffs mean for me. I think we're at a point now where it's very difficult to make decisions because there is so much forward-looking uncertainty for organizations. But now is the time to really step back and think about what are those milestones, those thresholds, those decision points that as an organization you're going to be looking for that allow you to then make a decision as and when those things become more clear. So things like make sure you have a working group together, a cross-functional working group across sales, marketing, your supply chain functions in procurement, planning, manufacturing, logistics. Are you huddling together? You're thinking about, well, what products do we have? Where do we source those products from? Where do we source the components? Where are we selling those products into? So what are the markets that we're participating in? And really having then a view of prioritizing those products, those markets, your customers. Where do those land in priorities? Then that then starts allowing you to start thinking about scenarios where, okay, we got this product out of China. Yes, there's 145% tariff on that product today. I don't know if I can move that to Thailand or India because maybe it's 46% in Thailand and 22% in India, or maybe it's something else. So, but at least now I start having thresholds that saying, okay, it's 145% in China. I can or cannot be in that business. Where else are my options? I have Thailand and I have India. Okay, so now I'm looking for that tariff needs to be no more than 50% for me to make a decision to move, right? Or if it's 30%, it's an automatic decision to move. But you don't know the answer to where that tariff is going to end up, but you now start having some decision criteria that you can apply. And I think that's really the first important step because of that forward uncertainty that I think organizations really need to make sure they're huddling on and thinking through today.
It seems challenging. It does seem to me that there's always uncertainty in the supply chain arena.
Yes, indeed.
You never know what's going to happen. COVID messed things up dramatically. The iPad that I bought during COVID spent months sitting in a ship in Long Beach Harbor waiting to be unloaded. It seemed to me that some of the fundamental foundations of international business
Mm.
have been tampered with. It's a bit like if you're a physicist discovering that gravity was decaying, or maybe a bit more to the point, in physics, in quantum physics, you have the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, where you can't tell if you know where something is, you can't tell where it's going.
Right.
We have a whole lot more uncertainty on the foundation of the way the world has worked for the last 40 or 50 years. Can you cope with that?
No, I hope it's not as bad as gravity decaying.
Well, that would,
Indeed. Yes, there's a lot of turbulence. There is a lot of uncertainty. That word uncertainty over and over and over again, right? Absolutely, absolutely true. But I also don't want us to lose sight of there are processes and tools that we do have that allow us to navigate the uncertainty. Again, I think what has really changed is we don't know what that end game is, nor do we necessarily have sort of a small set of possible outcomes. I think that's something that has changed. That forward landscape really is almost completely blank slate at this point in a lot of ways. You really just don't know, do I go left? Do I go right? Yeah. And so oftentimes it's better, frankly, at this stage, really to kind of to again look at what there are some really short-term things that one can do, but this is not a time necessarily for you to go ahead and start deploying large-scale capital or making long-term choices. So I think there are sort of two, what I think was foundational activities in supply chain, right? That are complementary but serve somewhat different purposes. The first one is your sales and operations planning activity, right? So S&OP, or in some places you might hear it referred to as sales and operations execution, S&OE. And really that is designed to take a short-term view about what do I do in the next 0 to 12, maybe 18 months operationally. So where are my customers? What are the customer demand going to look like from me? Where am I sourcing my products? Where do I need to get them from? How much inventory do I need to hold? Where do I hold that inventory? So those sort of short-term operational decisions that you have to take. And there are some of those that you can think about taking today. So I mentioned we don't know where tariffs are going to be at the end of 90 days from now, for example. But for the next 90 days, I know I have tariffs of 145% if I get that material out of China. I have 10% tariffs on that. I'm using this example. I'm going to have 10% if I get that material out of Thailand. So to the extent that in the next 3 months, I can move what I can from China to Thailand in this example, let's do so, right? That to the extent that you can do that, make those sorts of changes. Start thinking about, well, if I don't have that kind of optionality, where might that optionality exist in the near term, right? So even if I'm not getting out of Thailand, can I? So then how do I start thinking about being able to have that option to get it out of Thailand? So those are things that you can do today. And if you have an effective S&OP or an S&OE process, you can have those conversations now and start thinking about those types of quick fixes you can put in place. Tied to that is sort of the longer range thinking, that more strategic approach around they call it integrated business planning. And that really is now thinking about, in some ways, answering the question, what do I want to be? Where do I want to play 18, 24 months from now, 2, 3, 5 years down the road? So that's a much longer range strategic view. So those are where you start getting to questions around, well, what are the markets I want to be in, right? So the simple example, do I want to be in the US or do I want to be focused world outside of the US? If I take that as a potential binary choice, given the tariff environment that we're in, what are the types of products that I want to sell? If today I'm in textiles and I sell both socks and I sell suits, right? In a highly volatile tariff world, socks may not have the margins that I need in order to stay in business. So then I might need to make a choice of maybe 2 years from now, I no longer want to sell socks. I just want to sell suits, right? As an example of the type, but that is a strategic business decision that you have to take, types of customers I want to go after, etc. Those are two activities that you really need to start making sure that you have buttoned down and are actively engaged on. That short-term tactical response to the world as it is now that you know, and then that strategic thinking around, well, how do I start thinking about what are those choices I might need to make that might be more fundamental shifts into what I do and how I do it. Where do I deploy capital? Where do I deploy long-term contracts? That then is a second element that companies really need to start thinking about. And again, I go back to, because of that shroud of uncertainty, you may not be making decisions today, but you're thinking about what are those criteria for those decisions, right? And what are the thresholds at which I will then make a decision? You can start doing those things now.
You really are starting to prepare for the decision criteria and the things that you're going to have to be thinking about
Exactly.
when things become a bit more clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed.
So it's a fun place to be, right?
It
No,
certainly is.
no boredom. It's not just watching things pop off the assembly line. It's a lot of a lot of prepare.
It is. And I think this is where supply chain and supply chain professionals are oftentimes uniquely prepared. I mean, I know, again, I don't want to downplay how impactful this world we're living in is, but every day, there's never a dull day in supply chain. Something happens, right? So I think as an organization, unlike some other parts of companies, if I put my little siloed hat on and ring supply chain's bell, right? We're used to disruption. We're used to things going wrong. Murphy's Law lives in supply chain, right? And so I think that muscle of being able to and willing to respond as and when disruptions happen is something that I think we've honed. What we have to continuously get better at, and the muscle we really need to exercise in this environment, is being able to step back and not necessarily just respond immediately and reactively. This does require us to take a bit more of an integrated view because there are so many different moving pieces at the same time, as opposed to this being 1, 2, 3 things that have hit us. This is 10, 15, 20 things that are hitting us at the same time.
We live in interesting times. Thank you
That we
very
do.
much. I'm fairly convinced we'll probably have another discussion on this. Thank you for
Indeed, let's look at what's on the headlines in 30 minutes.
Sounds good. I'll check it out. Thank you. Best wishes. Have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thank you, Dan, and to you as well.